Happy New Year, and welcome to your first grade 10 computer science video of 2018. So here are a few instructions. Take a moment to read them. The most important one is number 1. Make sure you've got your test in front of you. And then the second most one is number 3. Make corrections so that you can use it to study for your exam or simply to learn. Here are the first few questions for you. In this case, I'm asking you to first write a single line of code to show the input box, and then I'm asking you to write a line of code to show the message box. And notice how I have color-coded the code. Red are variables, blue are functions, green are text, and black is any sort of other character. So in the first case, you're asked to create an input box which has age as the title, enter your age as the prompt, and this is how you would go about doing it. You would choose a variable name, age is a good one. You would assign the value of the input box to that variable, and your prompt is enter your age, and the title is age. Now, you take that input and then you display it in a message box. And this is how you would structure that. You would need to have your received age as your message. You would have to concatenate the variable to it. And then, in this case, there is no icon, so you can leave this blank, or you could put a 0 in there. You don't know this yet, so I'm being very lenient on this particular aspect of this question, and you need a title user input. If you wanted to do it properly without leaving it blank, you would put in VB OK only. But again, that's not required because you don't know this yet. Next, I asked you to create a conditional block. So you had the choice to create, I guess, a few different types of if statements. If you want to keep it simple, you could strive for the level 1. If you wanted to use an else statement, a level 2. And if you wanted a full 4 marks, to give what you see here. If, else, end if. Remember that you always need to finish with an end if. At the bottom of this frame is a simple if. That would have been worth 2 marks. The compound if at the top would have been worth 4 marks. Now notice that there is a problem with the compound if at the top. First you test to see if age is over 18 or equal to 18, and then you print adult price, and then you test to see if age is over 65, and you would print senior's discount. The problem is, you will never see a senior's discount because seniors are automatically over the age of 18. So the first if statement, print adult price, is the one that executes. So in this case, I would have actually deducted 1 mark because your logic did not work. Here are the multiple choice questions. You'll notice that the answers are T and F. F is highlighted in yellow, T in green. The one that I think is worth pointing out is the absolute function. So here it says it returns a value that is greater than 0. Well, what happens if you feed 0 into the function? Shouldn't you get 0 out? Here are the evaluate questions. So I suggest you pause at this point to examine the answers. And you'll notice that the order of operations, bed mimas, or bed mass, comes into some of these. So for example, the first one where you're subtracting 4 times 5 integer division 3 from 20, you'll notice that multiplication happens before integer division, which happens before subtraction. For the one on the right, does 1098, 1098 come before 185, well, the answer is false. If you are thinking mathematically, 1098 is definitely greater than 185. However, this is not math. This is the ASCII character set. In this case, you have to compare each position independent of the length of the string. So 1 and 1 are equal. 0 comes before 8, which means that this test, this Boolean expression, is false. Next, you've got shoe shine with a space, and shoe shine without. Does shoe shine with a space come before shoe shine without the space? Well, the space is compared with the S. Space comes before S, which makes this a true expression. Here you're taking the value of the string 85 and comparing it with the string 85. So this is a type mismatch error, because you are comparing a numeric data type with a string data type. Next, you're doing a mathematical expression. You are taking an int of a negative value, and you should remember that it looks for the next lowest integer. And you have to use the number line. So negative 323.14 actually will result in negative 24. And the final one, you're comparing an uppercase letter with a lowercase letter. Uppercase letters come before lowercase letters in the ASCII character set. Next, take a conventional formula, one that you're used to, the Pythagorean theorem, and convert it into a visual basic statement. So I've given you 3 different ways to do it, actually 4 different ways now that I'm looking at it. Pause the video and take a look at them. Next, you're using a control with the name label result, which tells you that it's a label, which means that you need to use the dot caption property. Now, you're asked to display this phrase if a temperature contains a temperature reading below negative 10 degrees Celsius. So this is one way to write it. You could choose a few other ways, but this is pretty much the only way to do it correctly. In the case of temperature, it is a numeric data type, in all likelihood a single, though I guess you could use an integer. In this case, string is not appropriate, because if you were to use a string, you could end up with some very strange situations. For example, if temperature comes before negative 10, that would mean that a temperature of negative 0.1 comes before 10, then you would get a frostbite warning when it's negative 1, which would be incorrect because obviously we want it to be below negative 10 degrees Celsius. So in this case, again, you would not be using strings, which means if you had quotations around this value, or if you included the degrees Celsius symbol, it would not be valid. Next, prompt a user for a number using input box. If the number is odd, display a message odd number. Some of you had quite complicated solutions to this. This is perhaps the simplest. This is the one that I would recommend, and this is the one that we have been practicing. Next, I'm asking you to create a program. You take the number of minutes a person calls, and then you determine how much it costs them to place those calls. If a person calls for less than 150 minutes, they're being charged 25 cents a minute. Once they hit 150 minutes, any additional minutes would cost 8 cents instead of 25 cents. But you would still reasonably expect to have to pay 25 cents for the first 150 minutes. So that means that you need to have code that accommodates for 2 separate rates. A brief pause, and now I've also got a young Xavier listening in. So I'm going to leave you with the question above in blue. I suggest you pause the video for a moment to read that if you're not entirely sure about what to do. Now, again, I have color-coded the code here. First, you have your declarations. You need minutes, and you need a total. Perhaps you've got a message that you want to create as well, which would be a string. Notice the data types that have been chosen here. Minutes are integers, and your total, which is a dollar value, is being recorded as a single. You need to get input, and you may notice that you were using a text box, so this is how you get your input. You take the value of the contents of the .text property of the text box. Then you process. So you need to use your if statement to decide what to do. If you have more than 150 minutes to deal with. Xavier now has his crackers, and we are back to processing. So, if the minutes exceed 150 minutes, then you need to do a more complicated calculation. So any minutes that exceed 150 are computed at 8 cents per minute, while the first 150 minutes are computed at 25 cents a minute. Well, otherwise, your total is minutes multiplied by 25 cents. I'm not worrying about anybody who decides to enter a negative value. And then you output your data. So here are two different versions of the output. The one is the very simple version, and then the other one uses format $, which is a function that you will be learning very, very soon. Next, we have a classic problem which includes tax and discount. So in this case, I suggest you pause the video for a moment to read the instructions. Read the description of the problem carefully. You'll notice that if an item costs $100 or more, you discount it by 20%. There's also an example calculation there for you in case you need to have numbers to double check. Next, you've got the details of the problem. And if you read through it, you'll notice lots of keywords that help you along the way, including two diagrams. So the first, you see the word prompt. And it was bolded to begin with. That tells you that you're using an input box. You're also told in the problem that you're using message boxes, and if you look at the two diagrams, you see that they are message boxes. It even shows you the exact text to use so that you do not have to guess. Next, here is the code. As far as creating your code is concerned, start with the basic declarations. Hopefully you get all of the variables that you need, but if you don't, since it's a test situation, you might be a little stressed. Leave yourself some space so that you can add declarations as you need them, as you discover them. Standard procedure for this program: declarations, input, processing, output. So first we have a number of declarations: the purchase price, then the discount, the taxes that are being paid, the subtotal, the total, and then I've got two separate messages because we have two separate message boxes. It may seem like a lot of variables, but when you break the problem down, you notice that we actually reuse most of these variables. First thing to do, get your purchase price from an input box. In this case, I leave it up to you to get the details. And by that, I mean decide upon the prompt and decide upon the title. Make sure to initialize any variables that you might need. In this case, discount needs to be initialized because, yeah, it simplifies the program. So, processing. If your purchase price exceeds or matches $100, equals to or greater than 100, then you compute a discount and apply the discount. After you've computed the discount here, you need to calculate your subtotal. So you have your purchase price, you know that. You have your discount, you know that. And if the purchase price did not exceed $100, then your discount would have been 0 since you initialized it to 0. So this calculation works. It is also the simplest way of creating this problem, creating this solution, I mean. And you'll notice that there are actually relatively few lines in the processing section of this solution. Very few, in fact, because pretty much everything is duplicated whether or not your purchase is greater than $100 or not. Now, I've provided you with two different approaches to creating your output message. So you'll notice the first one is the simple version, and in the second case you have the perfect version, quote unquote. And in that case I'm using the format $sign alongside the currency option. So like I said, we will be learning about format $sign very soon. And we finish the program with our output, 2 message boxes with the 2 messages. So that was the test. Unfortunately, Xavier is a little bit sick, which is why you've been hearing the coughing and the commentary in the background. Xavier, what are you watching?
Wild Krat.
Wild Kratts. Don't know if any of you watched it, but that's one of his favorite videos.